So, guys, basketball is back. Yes. Playoff baseball is back. Yes. Everything is back. We have good football in New York. We're not talking about this week. You know what's not back, though?
What?
Spelling.
Welcome back, Hopkins.
Yeah.
Oh,
leave the K out.
Wow.
Everything. So I guess it's not really that much of a welcome back. I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait. You know what? I'll give her a C on a learning curve. I appreciate the effort at least.
You're going to give her a C on a learning curve? I'm giving her
no.
nothing.
That's an F. I'm sorry.
That's an incomplete. Welcome to the On the Sports Lines NBA preview show and a lot of other stuff. The Knicks, the Nets. We have teams to get on or off the hype train for. We have stars in new places, stars that are just back. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, come for the hot takes and stay on Anthony hating on the Nets and the Clippers. It's just a really good show that you're going to enjoy. Also, a totally unexpected National League Championship Series and a totally expected American League Championship Series with an expected result after 2 games. We'll review and look ahead. However, the opener takes a look at the team who raised a banner, got ridiculously expensive rings. You know, when you open the ring, you actually get more things in there, and it depends on if you've actually won titles. It's not weird. It's 2022. You got all that championship stuff with the Golden State Warriors, but not all is well in the Chase Center in San Francisco, as during training camp, Warriors stalwart Draymond Green punched Warrior up-and-comer Jordan Poole in a training camp scuffle, made worse by the fact that TMZ, doing more journalistic deep dives than Shams and Woj on this topic, released video of said incident. Now, after Draymond gave himself some time away, 7 days, Jordan got paid and extended hush money. Of course, also Andrew Wiggins also got the same thing that weekend. Draymond's contract is still up in the air. He is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. Spoiler alert, it's not looking good. So, Anthony, the title defense for the Warriors, they are 1-1. They lost to the Nuggets last night. A couple of questions are coming with it. What say you about the 2022-23 Dubs and this incident in particular?
You know what? I thought it was a great conversation with the NBA on TNT guys and Adam Silver talking about it Tuesday night. Just before the Warriors ring ceremony. Draymond Green has a history of playing kind of on the edge. I mean, we get it. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He didn't get drafted highly. The scouts say they didn't know he could really fit in the league because he didn't really have a position per se, and that has really driven him his whole career as far as being such a key member of a championship dynasty. But like I said, I mean, it wasn't a big deal until the video got leaked. And then we saw literally what happened. I know if it was me personally that he swung on, it'll be on site for the rest of the season. But that's just me personally. The thing is, though, on the court, do I think it's going to affect the chemistry? No, but off the court in the locker room might be a different story. I don't know if Jordan Poole is just basically, okay, we'll play nice. I'll play nice because I want to win a championship, but I don't have to be your friend off the court. I don't have to have the kind of respect that I would have had beforehand. But and I think Steve Kerr is the kind of guy, and the Warriors the kind of organization that can handle things like this. So the video kind of being leaked to TMZ is more of a surprise than anything, because we've seen teammates fight all the time. It's not even a big deal, but seeing the way Draymond haymaker his own teammate, the first I had a joke about it. I was like, "What was this when Tristan Thompson approached you at a nightclub several years back?" Number one, and number two. Yeah, but the thing is though with Draymond Green is that the same thing that made him a great player has also made him a bit of a nuisance on the court as far as opposing teams, as far as officiating, and because you just look at it like this: Jordan Poole getting his contract extended, along with Andrew Wiggins. Clearly, the Warriors see them as part of the future, and Draymond Green he has his final contract. I think.
By the way, I want to make he does actually have a player option for next year at 27.5. Yeah, Woj has said on a couple of things that he's almost going to exercise it, but that's more of kind of coming to conclusions. I'll talk about that more, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up before we continue on.
Yeah, and I just think it's just more of what's going to happen in the dynamic with the relationship away from the basketball court. Because I think on the court they're just fine. I think there's just more of the Western Conference being being a little tougher around the Warriors as far as it's just going to prevent them from repeating. But like I said, I had to give some thoughts. I know the reaction to the video was kind of a shock to everyone, but this is it's a thing that maybe it's a moment that Draymond Green had to see for himself, that all the little things he was doing on the court and some of the things that endeared him to Warriors fans, but not to everyone else. You know what? You got to do that on the court. I think that's what it is. I mean, you can't have that. You can't have that away from the basketball court, especially you can't do that towards your teammates of all things. So I think, like I said, in the short term, I don't think it's going to be a big of an issue, but depending on how the season goes and even the off season, who knows? I mean, I can see Draymond opting in and maybe being traded, for all we know. And it just depends on if the Warriors front office thinks themselves, you know what, he's been a great Warrior, but it's time to cut our losses. And right now, like I said, it'll go away.
I wouldn't, by the way, I wouldn't say cut our losses. I would say that the championships that were brought in, is definitely not a cut our losses situation. I think it's more of a time to get younger. And I'm gonna bring it over to Jay on this one to kind of get the ball rolling. Draymond, as you've said before, I think you've said it by many players, beats to his own drum, and I don't think that he's going to change anything in this season or seasons going forward. Does he have
to? I think he recognizes that he kind of he crossed the line, and he kind of has to buy back some trust, and I'll get into that a little bit later in my point. But honestly, I don't see Draymond getting traded this season. Whether or not he gets the contract extension or the new contract that he was looking to get after this year, is that now more in doubt than it may have been before the dust up? Yeah, maybe, but I still think that a lot of it's going to hinge on how things play out this season, both on the floor and in the locker room. But I'm gonna let me just start my point, my angle, by saying that in no way do I condone what Draymond Green did. Punching out a teammate is never okay. That being said, whoever leaked the video broke a code. You don't air the team's dirty laundry. This never should have become the very public story that it did. The minute it did, because the minute that happened, it got in the way of the Warriors dealing with it in the way they wanted to, because it became all that got talked about, which made it even worse. Everyone and their second cousin's Barbara's son's 8th grade gym teacher felt the need to weigh in. And even with the video, the rumors of how it all went down, they still didn't have all the full story and likely never will. The locker room and practice court dust-ups aren't new. Anthony and I have both played on teams. We've both seen those types of things happen, even in our small, part of the sports world that we were players in, me both as a football player and as a basketball player. They happen all the time across all sports. And yes, this one was bad, but they're kept in-house for a reason. It's their business. So they, as a team, as an organization, get to decide how to deal with it internally without the noise and commotion of everyone with a social media account. Whatever decision they make regarding how they do or do not discipline Draymond Green is theirs alone. If Green apologizing and stepping away from the team for a few days is good enough for everyone, then that's all that matters. If Jordan Poole decides not to speak on the matter, that's his choice, and it's not our place to tell him that he should do otherwise. Kevin Looney said that Green has some work to do to get back the trust from the team that he lost by this incident. But Looney believes that Green is willing to do it. For a guy like Green, who prides himself on being the big brother to the younger guys on the team, especially Poole, whose locker has been next to his since day one, Yeah, I'd like to believe that Draymond will do the work. If their opening night blowout of the Lakers is any indication, it would seem like the team is back on the same page, at least on the court, and rowing in the same direction. Now, maybe getting their NBA championship rings was enough to remind them what they're all playing for and that they need each other to have a chance to get back there. I don't think this will have any negative effect on their ability to defend their title. Based on comments made by head coach Steve Kerr, Poole has been a big factor behind the scenes in getting the team on the path to healing. And that speaks well of him as an individual and the culture that this organization has created. Again, there is zero excuse for punching a teammate, but how the individuals and the team involved choose to handle it is up to them. And whether we agree with their choices or not, at the end of the day, it's none of our business. If they say they've moved on and are focusing on basketball, then take them at their word. That's what I'm choosing to do.
I'm only going to talk about what the future holds for Draymond Green here, because kids winning kind of, by the way, first of all, don't put them in the same room for the Michigan State football game next week. I think that's probably a bad idea. Let's keep them on separate couches for that. I didn't even realize definitely. It was a Spartan. I didn't even realize until now it was a Spartan and a Wolverine getting into a dust up. I think Draymond is going to be, I think the team is going to be fine. This is a team that is championship-led organization. There's paths to this not getting out. Steph Curry, leader. Draymond, who is a guy who is going to be in sports media and is part of the new media of society, is a leader. Klay Thompson is a leader. You have enough players in there. And as they say, the one thing that helps solve everything is winning. So I think that's going to be perfectly fine. What I'm really more concerned with, and it's still the first thing I thought of this whole situation is, and yes, the dust up should remain as private as possible, and it would not have gotten to the point where it was if the video wasn't shown. We're not going to talk about that anymore. But I'm very curious to see what Draymond's future is, because he's still a declining player as is. His defensive skills are still pretty top notch, but you can name more defensive players who are there longer and have been there and who are better right now. But his scoring has always been an issue, was an issue during the NBA Finals, and was a point where there was times when you could not even put Draymond on the court until really game 4, when he kind of got his mojo back and really helped this team get to the finish line of the series. There are a couple of options you can go with Draymond Green. You can either, A, have him exercise his option for next season. He can do that, and I think then you can just kick the can down the road one more year. But a lot of players don't like playing on expiring contracts, especially now in the NBA. You can B, figure out what the team is right now and see if a veteran team wants him and is willing to pay him or overpay him for the future. There's a lot of teams that would be willing to deal with Draymond Green's experience out there. And if Draymond wants to leave, and if Draymond feels it's time, then I think you might want to work something out. Or C, package him with your other young players. I'll talk about Golden State's future later on when we do another segment on this show, but there's no team who is better suited to make any trades possible for their future in Golden State because of the mix of experience and youth that they had. The 2 years that they tanked, they got a war chest of young people out there that they could easily move on or play themselves. So that's going to be what I'm going to be finding very interesting. It's very interesting to see a champion in the twilight of his career. And that's what Draymond Green is. And that's what I think is going to really be the key subplot in this season for the Golden State Warriors. Again, if you're a team like that, you don't have too many problems in your locker room. They only come up if the media wants it to come up. And the Golden State Warriors did the right thing. They dealt with the situation internally. They'll express it as much as they can. The only thing I would worry about is Draymond has a mouth, and I'm sure someone's going to ask him about it again, and he might talk about it again. And that's something the Warriors might have to worry about. All right, let's move on to the locals. We start with the Knicks. They get an off-season to-do list, and I have it right here in front of me. It read like this. Number 1, tamper with Maverick star Jalen Brunson. Number 2, make moves to have money to sign Maverick star Jalen Brunson. Number 3, get Jalen Brunson in free agency. Done. Number 4, not too much else due to the Jazz asking for a King's ransom for Donovan Mitchell, who we'll also get onto later on. Now the New York Knicks look to make their move back to respectability, or more specifically, a play-in or playoff spot. For their first 2 games, I don't think it can go any better outside of winning in Memphis on opening night. And they left Detroit in a fucking heap yesterday in the home opener at Madison Square Garden. Signs are there, guys, and just have to just kind of keep it up for the whole season. All right, Anthony, we're going to start on our segments, and you're going to go for Star Watch. Julius Randle was actually the best player on the court for the Knicks on Wednesday night. Has he turned a corner? What do you expect in the new year for the former most improved player in the league?
Well, just any player that has kind of personified the up and down the New York Knicks the last 3 seasons has been Julius Randle. Think about his first year in New York, kind of a lame duck situation with David Fizdale and a regime change at the front office. And then 2 years ago, of course, most improved player of the year, wanted to make the playoffs. And then last year, everything just kind of fell apart. And it started out great with the whole Bing Bong moniker from the fans. And then it went from that to, the thumbs down gestures, the fake apology on Instagram. Then you had knocking the laptop out of an assistant's hands on national TV. You had the Obi chants that clearly became more and more loud at Madison Square Garden. To say that Julius Randle wanted to forget last season is an understatement. But for the first 2 games, what I've seen even in the preseason, I like what I see from Julius Randle. One, he's not holding the ball nearly as much as far as being this point forward in isolation. I think that was one of the things that was an issue last season, holding the ball too long and taking too much time and making a decision whether he wants to attack the basket or hold or pass it. And I think Jalen Brunson being a true point guard finally that the Knicks can rely on, really does help that an awful lot. But, I mean, look at his numbers last year. I mean, his field goal percentage, depth, his 3-point percentage is way down, 30%. And a lot of that had to do with the guy that was going to have the ball up a lot and be the center of attention. Defense is playing him a lot better, a lot more. And also, it's a bit of a coaching because Tom Thibodeau, for whatever reason, refuses to have him and Obi Toppin on the court at the same time, which with a small lineup would move Randle to center. I actually think offensively that would open things up for him more because he would be the quicker big on the court. But then when you look at the game Wednesday night, Julius Randle had 24 points. Was efficient for him as it gets. But then when you look at the game when it blew out the Detroit last night, he only had 15. And I think when you see games like that where the Knicks are getting a lot more contributions from other places, I think it was best for this particular team that they have on the court. And Julius Randle doesn't have to feel like he's forcing shots. He can play more within the offense, get more within the flow of the system. But it's going to be also it's an attitude thing that I'm looking towards, which is why I've seen a little bit of encouraging signs in the preseason. Last year you saw him missing a lot of box outs, not giving full effort for closing out on shooters, half-ass attempts, get back on defense. You see him getting into the refs an awful lot. Doing so many things just in body language that was a bit of a turnoff and had Knicks fans actually thinking that that the Knicks should trade him in the offseason. Obviously, that's not going to happen because the contract extension kicks in. So good luck with doing that. But I think Julius Randle can definitely have a bounce back year. Do I think he's going to have a 24, 25 points a game season? No, I don't think so. And you can even make the question if this Julius Randle's team, because RJ Barrett came on so strong the second half last year, and he got the big contract extension. So there's always a question mark with that. But Julius Randle is still pretty much the centerpiece on the court because his scoring and his rebounding does open up a whole lot of things for the Knicks offensively. It's just going to be a matter of can he stay within the offensive floor? Can he defer to Jalen Brunson when he needs to? And also, and the pick and choose when to take over a game, like we saw him do a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he could easily do that, but the only difference is outside of the team 2 years ago, now the youth of that team has developed to a point where there's a lot more options now than just that. By the way,
They're
they were
very
up
athletic,
20.
by the way, too.
Yeah. By the way, they were
A
up
lot of
20 at
athleticism.
halftime, and nobody on that team scored more than 20 last night. You had 6 in double figures, so I'd hold off. The 15 for Randall is perfectly fine. That game was pretty much over once the second quarter hit. A very good performance by the Knicks last night. All right, Jay, time to talk about Jalen Brunson and what he is going to bring to this team. Is the $100 million man's juice worth the squeeze?
Remains to be seen, but the early signs point to possibly. This may be the captain obvious choice for, the secondary player to watch on this team, but Brunson, as the rabbi was not shy about alluding to, was the big offseason acquisition. So that automatically makes him a player to watch. Sure, Brunson on paper gives the Knicks the starting point guard they've been looking for seemingly since Mark Jackson left. But the question is, how does his game fit with how Tom Thibodeau runs his offense? You got lane cloggers like Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson taking up driving lane space, and RJ Barrett is more of a slasher than a knockdown shooter from the perimeter. Evan Fournier is the only member of the starting five who qualifies, if you will, as a perimeter player, hitting on, almost 39% of his 7.7 three-point attempts per game last season. Now, Brunson may only be 6'1", but he uses his broad frame to bump and bully players much larger, cracking open narrow spaces to release spinning mid-range shots or clever finger rolls off the backboard. It's something he's been doing since his Villanova days. He systematically wears down defenders, feinting, deceiving them into off-balance stances, and then he mercilessly takes advantage of them being out of position. He's not an early shot clock player, though. He'll get past his defender, but only after he's carefully orchestrated how he wants to do it. And sometimes that takes time off the clock. But it was effective. He shot 56% on twos over the last 2 seasons in Dallas. Now, he benefited from the spread offense that the Mavs ran, taking advantage of closeouts when Luka Doncic found him on the weak side. But with the Knicks, some of those stuttering drives and floaters might have to become pull-up threes due to the lack of spacing he's going to have to deal with. Now, those pull-up threes may need to become a larger part of his game. Why? He only averaged 1 per game last season, hitting at only a 30% clip. That's got to improve. He's really good with his feet set in the corners above the break. But if he could take and make more looks from distance off the bounce, then you're looking at a much deadlier, more dynamic offensive player, something the Knicks have been lacking at the lead guard slot. Like I said, he needs to take more threes overall. 3.2 attempts per game he averaged beyond the arc last season, and Dallas is not going to cut it with the way that Tibbs wants to play. Brunson will also need to be more of a primary facilitator than the secondary one that he was in Dallas, though his per 36 minutes with and without Doncic on the floor lead me to believe that he can be that guy. Here's how they break out. With Doncic, he averaged 14.8 points per game and 3.5 assists per game per 36 minutes. Without Doncic, those numbers jump up to 22.1 points per game and 7.4 assists per 36 minutes. Now, Brunson thrived in Dallas largely due to playing in 4-out and 5-out lineups that allowed him to attack creases one-on-one. The Knicks rarely have 4 perimeter threats on the court. I don't know if they have 4 perimeter threats on the roster. And 5-out is highly unlikely, both because it's not a part of Thibodeau's vocabulary and with how this roster is built. Now, can he adapt his game to give the Knicks what they desperately need from that guard position? Lead guard slot so far 16 points per game, through 2 games. 2-point shooting isn't off to that great of a start, only 47.6% overall, though it is 53.3 from the painted area on 15 attempts, which is more than half of his 29 shot attempts overall. But his playmaking is off to a good start. 7.5 assists and 0 turnovers through 2 games. And he's attempted 4 threes per game, hitting him at a 37.5 sample size. But if you're a Knicks fan, you're hoping that what you've seen so far is what you'll get from him this season. And if it is, then your big free agent signing, Rabbi, then the juice will have been worth the squeeze.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so I'm going to talk about how the coaches are going to be on the hot seat this year. I'm going to give it a scale from 1 to 10 because that's the only way I measure stuff, not hot, very hot, or whatever scale you want to do it. I do it numbers wise. And I would say Thibodeau is at about a 6. It's very interesting. Yes, the patience is really, really thin in New York, and it's ridiculously thin. And I think the bigger issue, for Tibbs' future is the fact that this is probably the year Leon Rose has to make significant improvements, or that might be the first thing to go. And then Tibbs would pretty much go along with him. The one different thing for Tibbs is, I think, of this year, the only real veteran on this team, and Tibbs always relies on veteran presence, is Derrick Rose. Taj Gibson isn't here anymore, and they had to make moves to kind of make the roster in its young image that it already is. There's only one person who's over 30 on this team. And when you get into a rotation, by the way, that's going to have probably 11 players seeing starting time, depending on what you think Quentin Grimes is going to do in the Cam Reddish spot, and how Quentin Grimes and Cam Reddish are going to be fighting for minutes. I mean, you got Barrett, who just signed the extension in the offseason at 22. You have a lot of good young players on this team. The question is really, one, can Tibbs adapt to a style of this style that they don't need to depend on 40 minutes from RJ Barrett. They don't need 35 to 40 minutes of Julius Randle. You can spread those minutes out. That's something Tibbs doesn't do. You have to have Tibbs to trust young players. That's something that Tibbs doesn't do. Tibbs is not a person who adapts to style. We've talked about the coaches that adapt to style all the time. Those seems to be the one that win, especially in the NFL. NBA, not that way with Tibbs. Not that way with Tibbs at all. There are a lot of coaches out there. I'm sure I can find one or two of them that will adapt to young people's style. Tibbs is different. Tibbs is going to have to do that to kind of continue his way on in New York, and he's going to have to continue to have the trust in the players he has. Now, trust me, I'm grading this on a curve because we'll get to Steve Nash's hot seat in just a minute, but compared to Steve Nash's hot seat, Thibodeau's is very, very cold, but it would not be a surprise if Tibbs was not the coach of this team next year. But I don't know. That's a really hard question to say. His question is a lot harder than Steve Nash's question, which we're going to get to right now. All right. It's time for another episode of Brooklyn's famous drama, Nets of Our Lives. Going into the season 3 premiere, we see a star in Kevin Durant, whose trade demands were not met from the offseason, a returnee to life in the NBA in Ben Simmons, and Kyrie playing the evil villain who usually screws stuff up, just like he's done every year in his life, and introducing Royce O'Neal as that other guy. Okay, let's preview this train wreck, or good train wreck. The game against New Orleans, you saw the train wreck value, and then last night they beat the Toronto Raptors, a team who, by the way, they've only beaten like 6 times in the last 39 that they've played them since. I think it's either 6 out of the last 33 or 6 out of the last 39, but they don't beat Toronto often, so that was a very interesting win. So we're gonna do the same Star Watch, secondary player, the whole thing, and I'll talk about Steve Nash. I'm going to really enjoy talking about this team. Anthony, wither the always mad at something Kevin Durant. What is he bitching about now?
Well, last season, I mean, look at everything that happened with Kevin Durant. You just think about the Nets down to destination issues. Then he gets hurt. He misses several weeks. He comes back. Help the Nets get into the playing tournament. They eventually do get a playoff spot. They get swept. And then he demands a trade that was not met. So that's pretty much Kevin Durant in a nutshell. And all this is the fact that he averaged 29 points a game. I mean, the guy can still play. I mean, that's the whole thing about this whole Brooklyn Nets team is that they're so talented, but every time we talk about the Nets, it's never because of the talent on the court. It's always because of something else that's going on. And the thing with Kevin Durant is this year, now he has Kyrie Irving back. Obviously, there was no vaccination restrictions to speak of this season. And you think about the fact that everything's centered around Durant. This whole team, this whole organization, even from the even from the James Harden trade and bringing Kyrie back as a part-timer, everything is centered around KD. And he was such a good player. We saw it open night. He was the only one who showed up. He scored 31 points in a very lopsided loss. And they hit a big three-pointer to beat Toronto 24 hours ago. So this is a chance when you think about if the Nets can stay healthy and they get anything out of Ben Simmons for that matter, that this is an opportunity for Kevin Durant to actually rewrite his time in Brooklyn, because right now it's been somewhat of a disappointment when you think about the Nets they finished literally within a toe of being in the conference finals 2 years ago to last season being just being a mess from top to bottom and get swept in the first round of playoffs. This year, you think Kevin Durant they need him to be Olympic Kevin Durant. The guy we saw in the Olympics last summer, where he pretty much led Team USA to gold medal and was the best player on the court night in and night out. This is a guy who still can shoot 40% from the field. He shot 55% from twos last season. And it's just a matter of Kevin Durant just, being more engaged on the court and leaving the off the court, the Twitter, the back and forth with Charles Barkley. Leave that alone. I mean, we know he's the one sure bet on a Brooklyn Nets team that you don't know what Kyrie Irving is mentally half the time. We saw him doing the pregame speech that got a little attention about calling out Joe Biden, and then the pregame huddles talk that clearly fell flat because the Nets was behind by 16 before the quarter was over. Kevin Durant's really the sure bet on the court. He's gonna play. He's gonna be the guy he's gonna be the guy for 48 minutes, and it's just a matter of him being the on-court leader. That's what the Nets need right now. They don't need him to be a raw locker room individual, but they need him to be the best player every night, because when he's not, that's when the Nets go into trouble. And granted, Kyrie Irving is a guy who can pick up the slack, but this team is really Kevin Durant's team. I mean, he wants to acknowledge it or not. If the Nets are going to be anything this season, it's going to fall on his shoulders, and he has to be the guy that maybe he was reluctant to be in Golden State as far as being the on-court leader, but he's going to be that this season if the Nets will do anything moving forward, because this is a short window team. I mean, pretty much what it is.
The window's probably closed at the end of the year, by the way. And Anthony, did you just criticize Kyrie Irving for having a failed pregame speech, by the way? At what point does pregame speeches qualify in anybody's category?
You know what? Because Jameis Winston's "Eat the W."
"Eat the W" is the worst pregame speech of all time.
Kind of set the bar. But I just got like this. Some guys, it's like, you know what?
It wasn't. I'm not going to make.
We can take pensions, but maybe let someone else do this.
I'm not going to make excuses for the Nets, but not having Joe Harris and Seth Curry hurt them in game one, and then they got one of the two back in game two, and it was a little bit of a difference. All right. They won, right? That's a little bit of a difference. Oh God, here we go. Jay, Wither Ben Simmons. Wither Ben Simmons. Let's just talk about it and then get the monkey out of the bag now.
Yeah, and get the elephant out of the room. It's another Captain Obvious choice. I mean, with the expectations that a healthy Ben Simmons with his unique skill set could bring lining up alongside KD and Kyrie, I mean, that automatically makes him the secondary player to watch. I mean, at his best, Simmons is a triple-double machine on offense and has the ability to guard 1 through 5 at an elite level on defense. At his worst, Simmons is a player who wilts under pressure and lacks confidence in his abilities when the spotlight is the brightest, like in the crunch time and, gauntlet of the NBA playoffs. Which version of Simmons will the Nets get? Is he completely healthy, both physically and mentally? Will, being able to hide in the rather large shadows created by Durant and Irving allow him to play his game without as much scrutiny as he got in Philly? Will he actually take a jump shot from 3 or anywhere else outside the
No, I'll answer that question for you.
He seems to think the answer to all of these questions is yes. We'll see. Look, on paper, Simmons is a perfect complement to Durant and Irving. He takes the playmaking load off both players, allowing the focus more on scoring the basketball, which they both do at an elite level. Simmons' ability to grab a defensive rebound and get out in transition should give the Nets a few more easy scoring chances per game on offense, creating for himself or for Durant or for Irving, or kicking it out to shooters on the wing. Spot up guys like Joe Harris, Seth Curry, and Patty Mills are going to love the open threes that they'll get, that Simmons will generate for them. And the ability of a two-time first-team all-defensive player to lock down the opposing team's best perimeter player will free up Durant if it's a forward, or Irving if it's a guard, from having to expend energy on the other end of the floor. Yes, I know Kyrie doesn't really expend energy on the other end of the floor, but that's a whole different conversation. Here's the stat that has everyone in the Nets organization stoked about the possibilities of what a fully returned to form Simmons could mean for them. In 2020-21, the last season he played in, he generated 10 three-point field goal attempts per game for his teammates, which they knocked down at a 39% clip. According to PBP stats from 2017 through 2021, Simmons trailed only Russell Westbrook in three-point assists. Here's the stat that should have everyone in the Nets organization concerned. Simmons underwent a microdiscectomy in May, and while he has recovered, back injuries tend to be plural. Michael Porter Jr. underwent that same surgery in college and has had 2 subsequent operations. As important as it is for Simmons to get back to being who he is at his best, the Nets are going to have to be very cognizant of his load management and his health, both mental and physical. Like I said, at his best, Simmons can be the piece that gets the Nets over the top in an ultra-competitive Eastern Conference. At his worst, well, just replay the tape from Game 7 of the 2021 Eastern Conference semifinals against the Atlanta Hawks. Sixers fans, like me, are still pissed off at Simmons for that one.
The one thing I'm a little worried about if I'm Ben Simmons is the fact that this team is so inept defensively that opening night, Ben Simmons was essentially on Zion Williamson, and Zion Williamson, as long as he puts 20% effort into a play, and I think that number might be lower, he gets to the basket. I don't want to even say it's like 10%. He is one of the most physically gifted athletes I have ever seen, and it's hard for someone who is just even coming back from being a year off in the NBA.
That was such an unfair mismatch. I mean, I know Ben Simmons is good, but
the problem
that's just unfair.
The problem is for Simmons, a lot of teams have that guy, and the league has just gotten so much better in just a year and a half that the talent is everywhere. And I don't know if Ben can be a lockdown defender on, say, a Joel Embiid at key moments of the game when we get to that.
Yeah, but
he's not going to put
I mean, as much as we know he can potentially guard fives if you need him to, he's not going to spend the bulk of his game guarding a guy like Joel Embiid.
No, Joel is a bit different example, but I don't think a guy like him needs to be guarding fives all the time. I think he needs to spread it out, and you really don't have that number 2 defender. You had that on the Sixers. There were a bunch of defenders on the Sixers. You don't have that.
Honestly, here's the thing. I mean, unfortunately, it's going to put a guy, especially now that Bruce Brown's not around, it's going to put a guy like Durant in a position of having to maybe expend a little more energy. And it'll be a question of, who among the new acquisitions actually steps up and plays some solid defense. I mean, you talk about all the ways which on paper that the Nets, kind of improved themselves. Most of those guys are offensive focused players.
Morris, Daron Sharp, Royce O'Neal. Well, Royce O'Neal may be the better. Okay. Let's just talk quickly about, Steve Nash is a 9 for me on the scale of possible fireable coaches. I thought after opening night, after that whipping that they got from the Pelicans, I thought that number could be 10. It's very simple, and it's one of the facts, and I don't even need to say this, and I don't even need to go stats. I don't need to go the fact that the defense dropped from year to year last year, and the offensive efficiency, you didn't have Joe Harris pretty much the entire year. That dropped. I'm going to say this very simple. When you have a trio of guys in Kevin Durant who On the court is obviously the greatest, is one of the 5 greatest players in the NBA right now. I think, at least at his peak. But when he's off the court, he makes excuses for everything, attacks the media, and is basically Mr. Defensive in every single way. And I'm not talking about a Ben Simmons defense. I'm talking about a Kevin Durant, why are you doing this to me deal. You have Kyrie Irving, who Anthony can construct him any way you want. There's always something to find out about Kyrie Irving every day. That is so stupid. And then, of course, you have Ben Simmons, who is the least problematic off court of the 3. And he's still a guy who held out, a guy who admitted he did things wrong in an interview with the Old Man of the 3 podcast earlier last month, and that the Sixers did stuff wrong too. He is a mental health nutcase, but he's also a guy who still thinks he's exactly what he was when he came out of college. And the problem is there's no blame in between those 3 people. There's no blame for Kevin Durant. Kyrie Irving doesn't put blame on anybody. And Ben Simmons doesn't put blame on anybody. Hell, Kyrie Irving said, as a guy who is not under contract, me and KD and the organization will try to figure out what to do with the team in 2022 after getting eliminated by the Celtics. That alone, plus Nash's rumors of getting fired with the supposed KD, it's either me or the organization pretty much back in July in the summer. Everything just makes me think that if the Nets get off to a 10-10 start, 12-12 start, if they're languishing around the 500 line even before mid-December, Nash is gone. I think the coach is always the first person to get blamed, and unfortunately, the blame is Nash is a rookie head coach. We've seen people can their coaches before 2016 Cleveland Cavaliers and make their way to an NBA championship after. The precedent has easily been set. Nash can very much possibly find himself on the unemployment line by Christmas.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a stretch.
Yeah, 2 days. One, you got the Nets. First couple of weeks is pretty tough. They play quite a number of teams that were playoff teams last year, and also, and you thought I was tough on Kyrie Irving? Really?
No, I think you're absolutely right. No, but I say perfectly.
But yeah, I mean, like this, and also I think with this team is health too, because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons have missed a lot of games for numerous reasons, for health wise and God knows. But this team, you just stay on the court for at least 2/3 of the season. If you're on the same page, they could be really good, a really dangerous team in the Eastern Conference. Or even that, if things, most case scenario, this things fall apart and Nash is gone by, I would say, Martin Luther King Day. I'll give him a little more of a leeway, because I think Christmas they still may be hovering around, but things go south. He's gone before the All-Star break, without question.
Well, it's also a hot take media type situation, but we can get to that another day. All right, move on. Don't believe the hype or believe the hype. Your choice. It's a free country. This upcoming NBA season has some very great storyline teams and some great teams in general. I was even thinking when the Nets are healthy and whole, you can still think of 9 other teams that are better than them. This is a loaded NBA. It's hard to even pick 3 teams to even talk about in this segment, but grab your tickets, guys, and let's go all aboard the hype train. All right, Jay, you have stop number 1. Jay, who should we believe the hype in?
All right. Let me start by saying this, that the Sixers fan in me did not want to take this. I always cringe when high expectations are placed on the teams that I follow, and I tend to be in the I'll believe it when I see it category of fan. That said, the NBA analyst in me gave into the logic that when a team has the offseason that the Sixers had on paper, but backed up by people in the industry who know more about this than I do, like John Hollinger of The Athletic, who was an NBA GM for years, the hype might actually be worth giving some credence to. So that's how my analysis will go here. The Sixers were lacking in two things last season: 3-and-D perimeter players and toughness. With the acquisition of a couple of Daryl Morey and James Harden's pals from their Houston Rockets days, both situations, on paper anyway, would seem to have been resolved. Bringing in PJ Tucker gives the Sixers a player who will be an absolute pain in the ass to other teams. Tucker's a physical defensive stopper, a small ball 5, which gives you rotation and lineup creativity and options. And he's another reliable shooter. He's one of the best at the NBA at knocking down a corner 3. Adding Daniel House along with DeAnthony Melton from Memphis gives the Sixers a pair of true 3-and-D players who can hit from 3 on the offensive end. House and Melton are both career 36% three-point shooters, and guard perimeter players on the defensive end. Melton was second in the NBA in steal rate to his now teammate Matisse Thybulle. In other words, they're what you get if you combined Georges Niang, Matisse Thybulle, and Furkan Korkmaz into one player, or in this case, 2. And then the Sixers brought in veteran Montrezl Harrell to solve another ongoing issue for them, the backup center position. Harrell's career per 36-minute numbers are 21.5 points per game, 8.9 boards, and 1.4 blocks, and he shoots 62% from the floor. Numbers you wouldn't mind having for a backup. On paper, that makes him the best backup they've had during Embiid's time in Philly. And since Joel is not likely to play more than 70 games, the 68 he played last season was a career high, having someone who's more than just serviceable for more than just the 12 to 15 minutes a night that Embiid sits during a game is key to the Sixers' success. Harrell would seem to fit that bill to a T. Add all that to a team that has a perennial MVP candidate in Embiid, a rising backcourt star and third-year guard Tyrese Maxey, who averaged 17.5 points per game during the regular season, kicked that up to 20.7 in the playoffs, a forward who's been working on expanding his game to include more quick trigger threes in Tobias Harris, and a seemingly healthy and invigorated James Harden. And I can see why folks like Hollinger and others are picking the Sixers to potentially win the East or even win it all. Yeah, they're off to a tough start going 0-2 against 2 of their main competitors for the title of Beast of the East, the Celtics, who blew them out opening night. They lost by 9, but it wasn't really that close. And the Bucks, who they came up just short against, losing by 2. Harden has looked great in both games, going for 35-8-7 against Boston and 31-8-9 against Milwaukee. Embiid was good against Boston, 26-15-15. Not so much against Milwaukee, 15-12-3. And he's just shooting 38.5% from the floor. He's only had 12 free throw attempts through 6 games. He usually averages that per game. At least he, seemed like it last year. He also has a team worst, minus 17.9 rating. The bench has been average at best so far. Nobody's really jumped out with a performance, off the pine. Though instances where Rivers has gone to the small ball lineup with Tucker at the 5 have shown some promise. Once again, 2 games is a ridiculously small sample size. That being said, I have no doubt that Embiid will get back to his MVP level of play. And if everything else falls into place, the Sixers should once again be a top 4 seed in the East. But if this team is going to get past the Celtics and the Bucks, what we've seen so far in October can't be what we see in April. I'm cautiously optimistic, but that means that you all out there can go ahead and believe the hype that this is the best roster of the Embiid era, and this team is in much better position to at least make the conference finals than they were last year.
It definitely is the best roster of the Embiid era. By the way, 11.8 a game last season, so you were pretty close to correct. It didn't seem like it. It was that. The only thing I would be concerned about, Jay, going forward, I mean, again, 2 games, I think, is the Harden can become a much better player, and Harden can become Harden. But if Embiid and Harden don't mix, and it looks like at times, at least because of the spacing that the Rockets do, because again, this is Rockets East. Let's be fair. This is the 20. This is Rockets East. That I worry sometimes about what a guy like Embiid does in that lineup. Does it not show off to his strengths, Jay?
Right. And he's off to a rough start. And what we saw in the preseason, as limited as the action was, and what I'm hearing about what happened, in training camp is that Embiid and Harden are actually have seemingly improved their pick and roll ability together. They were really good at it last year. They were among the best in the NBA at it last year. So I think Embiid's slow start is probably why that's not looking as good as it did last year. But somebody mentioned, and I don't remember whether it was Hollinger or one of the Sixers beat writers, the Sixers' best avenue for success cannot have Harden playing at this level, playing at a higher level than Embiid. Embiid needs to be the alpha. Harden needs to be, I don't want to say Robin to his Batman because he's so much more than that, but he needs to, you don't want to see 33 and 8.5 from him. You want to see more like 25 and 11 from him, because that means other players are playing to their potential, and the Sixers are better served when Embiid is dropping almost 30 a game and everybody else is somewhere between, 15 and 25, and the bench is not a complete disaster when they step on the floor, and you're not looking at guys, and you wind up with guys, and you don't have guys who are unplayable when you get to the postseason. That's what you're looking for.
I think you need Embiid to be the alpha, Harden to be the beta, and Maxey to be the omega, if we're really going to put that in.
And that's the thing.
And Maxey's development is going to be very huge for that team.
Maxey's development will be huge if he's ready to take that next step. I mean, in his 36 points per game in preseason, which I don't put a whole lot of stock in, were ridiculous. I'm actually going to be seeing how he once again figures how to fit in the ever-changing dynamic of the starting five is Tobias Harris. You guys will remember when he came to this team, he was the number 2 scorer. This is a guy who was being relied on to drop somewhere between 18 and 22 a game. He's not anymore. He's a guy that's being relied on to, now maybe give you somewhere around 15 to 17 a game. And be, instead of being a guy who drives more to the basket or plays more inside, is going to be a guy who's going to be looked at to be more of a 3-point shooter and be the guy who's on the play designs that result in more of those type of shots. It's what he's been working on. And if he's able to expand his game and get that to an NBA, to the NBA caliber level, because it wasn't previously part of his game. If he's able to take that step in the expansion of his game, that will be a real feather in the Sixers cap.
Join this on part of me and Jay's new podcast. Jay and I talk Sixers for 2 hours coming soon. All right. The other podcast is going to be me and Anthony argue about the Clippers. And speaking of that, Anthony, who do we not believe in for 2022-23?
Yeah, we talk about the Los Angeles Clippers, and obviously you saw people jump on the bandwagon already after the first game, which was beating the Lakers Thursday night. And you look at that game, if the Lakers had anybody who could knock down a 3-pointer occasionally, they probably lose that game and start out 0-1. But besides the point there, I mean, they're getting Kawhi Leonard back healthy for the first time since we saw him in the 2021 playoffs in round 2. But health is going to be a big issue with this team. And you think about, and the fact that this team was already talking about low management for Kawhi before the preseason started, it's something of a red flag that should open some eyes a little bit. Think about this. Paul George missed 31 games last season, and combined, they've only played in 59% of the games the Clippers have played since they joined the roster prior to the 2019-2020 season. And then he added John Wall, who before Thursday night hadn't played a meaningful regular season game in 18 months. I mean, they're relying on 3 key guys who has a history of injuries. And remember, Paul George tested positive for COVID and wasn't even available for that second playing game, which New Orleans won and kept the Clippers out of the playoffs. This team does have a lot of versatility. You think about guys like Zubac being extended. Then you have Morris, you have Jackson, Terrence Mann, who was kind of a full kill from a couple years ago in the playoffs. And And they have the versatility that Ty Lue normally likes to have, the way he can mix and match lineups. And with Kawhi Leonard, obviously came off the bench the first game, but he's going to be in the start lineup at some point. Between him and Paul George's ability to be ball handlers and run an offense, that gives Ty Lue a lot of options as far as how he wants to open up the game and especially how he wants to close the game. We saw John Wall come off the bench to start that game Thursday night, but eventually being on the court has a potential closer. And if he's any semblance of the John Wall we saw in Washington during his All-Star days, this team can be very dangerous. But it's just going to be a matter of, can this team stay healthy? Is there enough minutes to go around because you have so many guys, so many who can miss and match in the lineup? And more importantly, the Western Conference is just, the last couple of years has just gotten so much better. And the thing was with a team of the Clippers that relies so much on guys who can't stay on the court. And you can throw this too, kind of with the Nets this year also, is that the teams like your next door neighbors are kind of improving their house and their property, and you're trying to just pretty much stay within the building code somewhat. And that's what the Clippers have been trying to do the last few seasons, that they're trying to get the star players back, but everyone else has gotten better and maybe actually a step above the Clippers as far as the Western Conference. I know that there's some beat writers that got the Clippers in the finals, and it's like, I don't even see the Clippers as a top 3 team in the Western Conference. Maybe definitely top 6. They're a playoff team without question. But are there a team that is in the conference final and maybe get into their first finals, their first ever final appearance? I don't know, because there's just too many good teams in the Western Conference, in a conference that's really top heavy right now. And also, can Kawhi Leonard and Paul George at least play in 70 games this season? That's going to be a huge question mark, because so, then maybe the sky's the limit. But
let me answer the question.
Marks.
Let me answer the question to that last question. The answer is no. But when you have, in their opening night game, 6 players went between 11 and 15 points. And that's not even including Norman Powell, who only played 21 minutes and is a ball-dominant person that could take over the game, and Reggie Jackson, who played 23 minutes and is also a ball-dominant person that can take over the game. I understand the question of too many minutes that you have, but that's a good thing in such a loaded conference that you're going to need people to step up at different times through the year. And we've seen that in the 2 years, especially of Ty Lue's reign from when the Kawhi got injured in Game 4, that they have people who can make shots at any time possible. And the Kawhi injury is a concern, but I think the fact that Kawhi agreed to start the season on the bench, and Kawhi knowing and going with the flow, maybe possibly for the first time ever in his entire career, actually saying going with the flow since his Spurs tips.
Well, we know his personality. He has no problem going with the flow of anything.
He has no problem going with the flow of anything, but he's also the guy who is also secretly rooting in the corner, who you don't know what's actually going to happen to him day in and day out. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Clippers do in 2022. All right, finally, I think we should be giving the Cavs just a little more hype. Because a lot of people still have this team as a possible play-in team. And yes, I know the East is so much better than they were, and it was last season, even with a possible better Nets team, and a lot of teams just getting that one extra player that they needed, if you especially look at the Atlanta Hawks, DeJounte Murray. But the Cavs were almost a team who was a top 5 team last year, regardless. If you look at how Darius Garland became a guy who could take over as a point guard position and played pretty much, and he played at an all-star level. He made the all-star game. And if you look at a court that has the Twin Towers, and it's not necessarily the Samson and Olajuwon days in Houston, but Evan Mobley, if he wasn't injured at the end of last year, would have probably been Rookie of the Year. And Jared Allen became an all-star last year himself, and both are under 25, and both had an enormous skill set, defensively and offensively. And then you bring in Donovan Mitchell, who they got late in the offseason, and we'll talk about Donovan in a second. This team was a top 4 team for about 3/4 of the season last year, and then Jared Allen got injured, and that team kind of went to a little bit of a tailspin. Who's to say this team isn't a top 4 team again, especially because Donovan Mitchell has, if there's a chip on somebody's shoulder, the chip is a bag of Pringles, is a can of Pringles right now on Donovan Mitchell's shoulder. Donovan has a lot to prove, especially the way he pretty much ended his Jazz career in that NAB series. His defense has taken a big hit over the last year. I expect that to improve. I expect Mitchell to become more of a two-way player. I expect Cleveland, who got unexpected contributions last year from everybody, including the long-forgotten Kevin Love off the bench. Cleveland is deep. Cleveland is going to be a team that, even if they don't end up as a top 4 seed, you're going to want to watch every single night, because that is just such a fun team to watch. In fact, they played Toronto at opening night, 2 teams who I think are both top 6 worthy, and it's a very, very good game to watch. The youth on that court just shows how talented the NBA is right now. When you're watching the NFL and you're watching a field goal fest on Thursday Night Football, remember, you're not getting that in the NBA except for like 7 teams who are pretty much all have the same point of tanking. Cleveland is fun, and I'm really excited to see where this train lands. Is it going to land in the Eastern Conference Finals? Probably not. But if it doesn't get to at least the Final 4 in the East, I wouldn't be surprised. Love that team a lot. All right. Finally, we need to talk about the people, the old faces and new places in 2022. And then I'll throw a little bit of the spin at the end. Time for this segment, and it's really focused on the Jazz breakup of 2022. By the way, we thought that team was tanking. They're 2-0 after wins over the Nuggets and the Timberwolves, teams who are going to be top 6 teams. What is wrong with the Jazz? In fact, the fact that they're trying to. All right, that's another story, another time. But Jay, Rudy Gobert is a Timberwolf. How did it? Yeah. A Timberwolf and a guy who just got posterized last night, by the way, in the first real posterization of the season. Not a great start, but let's talk about what Rudy Gobert means going forward for the other 80 games for Minnesota.
Yeah, I have to say that when this was a trade that surprised me a little bit, as I initially didn't see how Gobert would fit alongside Karl Anthony Towns in the T-Wolves front court. I get why Minnesota felt the need to make this move after losing to the Grizzlies in the first round last season. John Morant killed them with his forays to the hoop, and Brandon Clark killed them on the offensive glass. There is no better rebounder, over 12 per game, or rim protector, over 2 blocks per game in the association than Rudy Gobert. He's a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. So how does this work? Here's how the Timberwolves are looking at it in terms of how it helps Towns. Gobert's size and his smarts and his toughness are essential to give Towns some backline help on defense, so he doesn't have to be the one covering all that ground. Now he'll be guarding players out on the perimeter instead of in the post. On offense, Towns is one of the best shooters in the NBA. He's a career 39.7% three-point shooter on his nearly 2,000 career attempts. Case can be made that he should be taking 8 or 9 attempts per game from 3, so no longer having to operate from the post now that Gobert is here should help him, as well having more of a face-up and driving game. Is Towns tended to struggle with turnovers last season whenever doubles came. So right off the bat, it helps Cat on both sides of the floor, at least in terms of how the T-Wolves see it. In terms of how Gobert impacts the other key players, his ability as a lob threat, which is something they didn't really have last year, makes for a nice pairing with slick passing point guard D'Angelo Russell. His ability as a screener gives wing Anthony Edwards someone who can wipe out the man right in front of him, then shield another defender, thus giving Edwards more opportunities to get to the rim. He'll also do for Russell on defense what he did for Donovan Mitchell for all those years in Utah, clean up the messes that Russell's turnstile / Swiss cheese type of defense is sure to make. Now, what does Gobert get from the T-Wolves that he didn't have in Utah? Well, this again is how the T-Wolves see it. Jaden McDaniels is a top-flight perimeter defender, and Edwards showed some decent improvement in that area in his second season. So Gobert shouldn't have as many messes to clean up besides Russell's. Taurean Prince and Kyle Anderson can guard multiple positions and are smart position-oriented defenders, meaning Gobert won't have to scramble as much when they're in the wrong spot because they usually aren't. On offense, the presumed starting lineup of Towns, Russell, Edwards, and McDaniels can all space the floor for Gobert. Russell is at his best running pick and roll with a big who likes to roll to the rim, and that's Gobert's specialty. The Timberwolves also intend to let Gobert handle the ball at the top of the key in the flow of the offense to allow him to make reads and passes similar to what he did when he was on the French national team. On paper, this all looks good, but as my BFF and the former host of the show, Nisa Petrilli, is fond of saying, we don't play these games on paper. Will adding Rudy Gobert bring a championship to Minnesota? That's a tall order, no pun intended. He had 23 and 16 in their opening night win. And it probably hinges more on Edwards' continuing development and Towns' maturation than it does anything else. It does, however, make this team much improved from what they were last season, something this organization knew they needed to do if they're to be more than a one and done in the postseason.
All right, now let's prove one of my other points by supplementing it with another point. Anthony, Donovan Mitchell is a Cav.
Yeah, we all saw that one coming out draft night, did we? No, we did. Of course not.
If anybody ever sees a trade actually coming in the NBA, and we've done this for at least a half a decade now, where we're like, oh, I didn't know that team was in the trade market. Get eyes, guys, because it happens all of the time.
Yeah, you come from into your rock and take a look around.
Yeah, the Cavs got a top 25 player with 3 years left on his contract, and they add him to a up and coming team that was in a playing tournament and probably would have been a playoff team had it not been for the aforementioned injuries that Rabbi listed with to Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, who missed a significant portion of the second half of the season with a thumb injury. You look at what he brings to the table. He's an explosive scorer who can play alongside Darius Garland. And we saw that playing game against Brooklyn. Garland doesn't have a great shooting night. The team struggled to get points. Not with that in the case of Donovan Mitchell. He's a slasher. He's a guy who will pull up and knock down a three. He's a pick and roll guy too. And you have not one but two bigs in Jared Allen and Evan Mobley that can run to the basket and that can finish and also clean up the glass. Is it a perfect fit? Not so much, because Garland and Donovan Mitchell are question marks defensively. But you probably don't want to put too much pressure on your bigs having to clean up their mess. So Donovan Mitchell is going to have to move his feet more and be more engaged defensively, even on nights when the shooting is not there so much. But then you look at the fact that he is 26, that he's in his mid-20s, not even close to the prime of his career yet. And maybe the fresh start is needed for him. You think about the expectations that the Jazz had the last couple of years. They had great regular seasons, but came short in the postseason. Maybe if Donovan Mitchell wasn't banged up in a second round series against the Clippers, they win that series because that series won 6 games. And you think about how Mitchell adjusts to a small. Look, he's great in a small market. We've seen that in Utah, and obviously he's embracing being a Cleveland Cavalier as much as anything. Even though he went most of the season thinking he was going to be a homer and be back in New York, but that was not the case. This cast, and Rabbi, you mentioned this cast is going to be really fun to watch. They were a young team. They got a legitimate superstar and Donovan Mitchell that they can build, that they can center the team around, and they're definitely going to be a playoff team. And that's the thing too. The pieces they gave away to Utah is actually helped them with a 2-0 record. So right now, it's kind of a push on the trade, but I think for right now, I'm just making a joke about the Utah Jazz. I gotta give them a little
No,
credit.
I know. I'm actually.
I beat them up for taking the lesser trade, but it's worked out well for them so far.
Well, it's because of the fact that Colin Sexton just was not going to coexist on a team in any way, shape, or form with Darius Garland because of how Garland made that move last year. What I think people did not expect with that Utah Jazz team is the pieces that they got back aren't throwaways. Now, they may eventually be going on other teams, by the way, because, again, Danny Ainge is not interested in a slow rebuild. Danny Ainge is interested in getting this team into title contention right now, which that team would not be anywhere near unless they get a big star. Again, we'll talk a lot about Victor Wembanyama, I think, during this show this season. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why Cleveland got rid of some of their players, because they wanted a better fit.
Yeah, and I have to also throw this one just to make it in too, because Donovan Mitchell doesn't have to be as ball dominant as it was in Utah, because you have Garland there. That's a 1-2 combination of backcourt that can play off one another. And Mitchell can knock down the outside shot. So that's going to be a key thing to look for as far as the Cavs offense. It's just as the season progresses.
The only big difference I would say is, again, and we talked about it before with the Harden and Embiid pecking order. It's easier to put Embiid on that top of the pecking order because of how young he is. There's no real pecking order right now with the Cleveland Cavs, because you got 4 people who are either about to enter the prime of their careers or in the prime of their careers. That's going to be something that could be an issue going forward, but we'll see. All right. I could easily talk about DeJounte Murray going to the Atlanta Hawks. It's a great pickup, and I think it's going to help alleviate a little bit of the I have to do all by myself pressure that Trae Young, seemingly, whether he needs to or not, puts on his shoulders every 5 minutes. But I want to talk about, there's a 4-pack, there's a 5-pack of stars who are returning this year for the first time, for some of them in over a year and a half, coming back to the court. And it really interests me. It's almost like picking up a free agent. The Clippers have 2 of them in Kawhi Leonard and John Wall. And you saw on opening night, both were key contributors off the bench. If you ever thought Kawhi Leonard and John Wall would ever be off the bench in a regular move in 2012, I have a house to sell you in Manhattan for a very, very cheap price. But that's a story in itself, and it's going to make the Clippers a much better team and a title contender. You look at Jamal Murray coming back to the Nuggets, finally giving Jokic anybody who can make a shot on that team, and it's going to be a very different team. Murray had 12 in his opening night loss to Utah, so it's going to be a little bit of a move around. They load management him last night, and of course they beat the Golden State Warriors without him. It's just the Nuggets. I don't know what they continuously do with this. Jay talked to you about Ben Simmons before and how he might make an impact defensively off of the team that he's playing for now, the Nets. And then there's Zion Williamson, who, again, as I said before, is unguardable in the NBA. It's pretty simple. You could double team him and kind of get him off of the game. But what the New Orleans Pelicans did without him last year, in the fact that they kind of went all in and got CJ McCollum, and that pretty much paid dividends right out of the gate. And the New Orleans Pelicans basically took the Phoenix Suns to as much of the limit as it could be, even if it wasn't 7 games, it was 6, and really proved themselves to be on an equal and really a top 7-8 team in a Western Conference where you're going to have to get 47, 48 wins just to possibly host a play-in game, not to get to the playoffs, just to host a play-in game. So that's the story in itself. I mean, Brandon Ingram is now a top 20 player in the league. And if you put 2 top 20 players with each other, I was just gushing about the Allen Mobley combo. That combo is ridiculously good. At 16 points last night versus the Hornets, 3 assists and 5 rebounds. Caught the 3 turnovers in that game, but again, this is a team that can basically be your worst nightmare, and I'm very interested to see what the hopefully second full season of Zion Williamson in the NBA brings. I feel it's going to bring a lot of nightmares for opposing coaches.
The East is going to be fun this year, guys. It really is. It's going to be fun.
Well, the Pelicans are not in the East. You mean the West. I don't know which one to talk about, but yeah, both. The NBA itself is going to be fun. You're going to find a lot of really good teams, and that's the question is, how good is every team? There's about 25 playoff teams that, like I said, you're either one of the 22 or 23 teams who's making a playoff run, or you're one of the 7 or 8 teams that's tanking. If you're not, there's no in between. All right, we have to do it at the beginning of previews. It's annoying, and it comes back to usually haunt me every single time. It's time for predictions. Anthony, who's going to the NBA Finals from the East and the West?
Oh wow, the East. I still have. I think healthy. I just think the Milwaukee Bucks are the best team in the Eastern Conference, and that's not a slap in the face to the Celtics or the 76ers. I think they're definitely top three. But the thing about the Milwaukee Bucks team went 7 games without Chris Middleton playing any part of that series.
By the
They get
way,
him back.
not only going 7 games, but having a chance to win that series at home in that 6th game. It wasn't a back
Yeah,
and forth series. They had that series in game 6. So
yeah. No, I think, and obviously, I still feel like Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of the top three players in the game. Healthy Middleton, Drew Holiday is still there. It's amazing because we talked about Mike Budenholzer being on the chopping block just 18 months ago, and now he's hailed as one of the best coaches in the league. But they're my team to come out of the East. In the West, I wouldn't even call them a dark horse because I really think they're a team with a chip on their shoulder, considering how things ended last year. But I'm going with the Memphis Grizzlies. I just love the first 2 games. I mean, John Morant, and I said he was going to be a problem coming out of that 2019 that 2019 draft. I was like, people need to stop sleeping on John Morant. This guy is a bona fide star. He is a guy who gives you effort on both ends of the court, but more importantly, the team around him just is all bought in. And I think the way that series ended against the Warriors and the fact that that John Morant publicly wanted the NBA to give them the Golden State Warriors on Christmas Day. He got his wish, by the way. And the fact that this team just like they're not afraid of anybody, and they want that it's like I get the feeling they want the Warriors in the playoff series again. That's
Careful
a
what you wish for.
which for?
yeah, it's a careful what you wish for. It's a careful what you wish for scenario, but I think this is a team that is more than up to the challenge. You sent me the clip of them being how they came out to the opening game.
It was their second game.
The second
but
game, but you look at that and the fact that this isn't your father's grindhouse that we known over the years. I
Nope.
mean, this is a team that I think is ready to take that next step, and they're ready to do more of the punching than taking the punches this year. So they're my team out of the Western Conference.
Wow. Okay, Jay.
Eastern Conference, I'm going like Anthony. I'm going with the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, and no disrespect to the believe the hype that I just gave the Sixers in the earlier segment, or the defending Eastern Conference champion Celtics, both of whom improved in the offseason and should be in the season-long conversation for the title of Beast of the East. I still believe that the road to the finals out of the East goes through Milwaukee and will continue to do so as long as Giannis is playing at his Greek freak MVP level. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I fully believe, and I agree with Anthony, that if Chris Middleton had been healthy, it would have been the Bucks standing in the way of the Warriors getting their 5th title. The Bucks averaged a meager 101.7 points per 100 possessions in those 7 games against the Celtics in last season's second round loss, on pathetic 49.6% true shooting with Middleton's sideline. Middleton is healthy, so the Bucks' big three of Giannis, Middleton, and Drew Holiday are ready and raring to reclaim their spot as the Eastern Conference's favorite to make the finals. Western Conference, I'm going with the Golden State Warriors. This is as much about how I see the Warriors as I see the rest of the Western Conference. As I said in the opener, I don't think the punch will derail Golden State's ability to defend Otto Porter, but replace them with solid vets in Dante DiVincenzo and JaMychal Green. They'll have Klay Thompson for a full season. Andrew Wiggins has become an elite two-way player, and Steph Curry has shown no signs of slowing down. Kevon Looney is a force in the middle. Jordan Poole's on the short list of preseason 6-man of the year candidates, and the Dubs young guys have an exterior of seasoning under their belts. So as long as Draymond Green doesn't do anything Draymond-like during the season to derail it, I think it's the Dubs, especially when you add to the fact that contenders like the Clippers, the Suns, and the Nuggets have bigger questions than the Warriors do. So, yeah, I'm picking Golden State to get back to the finals.
one thing to mention about the Bucks, and I didn't even mention this. Joe Ingles is a
Yes.
3-point shooter extraordinaire that
Huge
they're going to
addition.
get
That's
they're
a
going to
huge
get back
addition.
at some time during the season.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come back until 2023. But Joe Ingles is probably one of the best players you can have off a bench for a run, and that's one thing the Bucks didn't have a great bench last year.
That
especially.
secondary playmaker can knock down a three. Smart, heady player, high basketball IQ. Yeah, when they get him back, he's definitely going to improve their chances.
By the way, the funny thing is how you just said, and this is how the NBA has changed. A pathetic 101 points per game for 100 possessions, which would be in the 90s, like the NECA of it. And the 49% true shooting percentage. It's like, this is the NBA that we're in, and it's really awesome. That we have the best balance.
It ain't the 90s anymore, guys.
But it's a balance. Like, yeah, last time it was a 90-88 game that just happened between the Bucks and the Sixers, and it was very compelling. Okay.
Yep.
With all that said, I really want to go the Bucks so bad in the East, but I'm going to zag and go the Philadelphia 76ers. Why?
All right, now my guys are completely jinxed. Rabbi's picking them.
I got the Western Conference champ right last year, so I almost had I didn't get the Western Conference champ last right, but they did very well then. But they might be jinxed, and I know they went 0-2, but only one number one seed has actually made the NBA Finals since 2015. So I think it's a good sign. I do think Joel Embiid has that capability to take the next step. I do think that team is 1 through 11 as cohesively meshed together as any possible team can be. I am depending on a couple of things here. Yes, Milwaukee and Boston are obviously the other two picks. I do think Giannis is due for an injury, which is something I'm kind of
on you.
It's not a shame. I just think
don't put that out there.
I'm not going to put it out there, but I do think Milwaukee does not have the more stamina to go through a season like this, and I do think there's going to be ups and downs. And I think the coaching change for Boston is a killer, and I do think they need Robert Williams to come back to really help this team as center as center, and I do think that's going to happen. There's so many good teams, but I do think Philadelphia is going to come out on top in the end. Even if there are 3, even if there are 4, there's just this little thing in me that's and I don't know if Doc Rivers is going to be the coach of the team. I'll just put that out there as well. There might be a D'Antoni sighting, but we can talk about that another time. Because I don't trust Doc Rivers. That's what makes this pick.
Yes, that's yeah. So I never trusted Doc Rivers at any of his stops. Granted, Doc has given you reasons not to trust him.
Nettie,
you are officially a Rivers hater.
It's rightfully so. Okay, and
West.
Golden State. I think you got to go with experience. I think it's a Captain Obvious pick, but when Golden State has been healthy and when Golden State has had their full lineup, they've won the West every single year. 2020, no anybody. 2021, no Clay. And just the matchups that they have is just insane. The team that they have is the perfect mix of experience and Curry, Thompson, and Green. And technically you can put Wiggins in that. You can put Wiggins in that category too.
Yeah,
and the perfect mix of youth. And guess what? They have 3 bullets in the chamber that they can fire at any time. If James Wiseman ever becomes the height that he believes in, you could fire that bullet. Jonathan Kuminga can be a scoring machine. You could fire that bullet. Moses Moody can actually be a rotation player. You have bullets that you can fire from that team. What they did in the 2 years that they didn't make the playoffs is insanity. And that's why I think Golden State has at least one more run in them. Will it be? It might not even be with Draymond. I do think Draymond's a huge part of this team. But again, if Draymond's not going to be there at the end of the season, and it's not due to injury, they're getting something good back in return. So I just got to think it's, for me, it's Philadelphia, Golden State. So we're all going with different NBA finals, which is good because now we can all be separately wrong. All right, moving on to the ALCS. And we would have put this in this spot regardless of how this series has went. but unfortunately the series has won exactly as a lot of people think the series has gone. For the Astros cheated crowd, which is always still going to be there,
Get past it.
let me give you the facts. The Astros have ended the Yankees season in 2015 in the wild card game, 2017 in the ALCS, 2019 in the ALCS, and they have a chance to do it again for the fourth time in 8 years if they can just win 2 or 3 in New York and not even have to go back to Boston. Yep. 2-0 series lead for the Astros, 3-2 game 1, close nail biter, 4-2 in game 2, close nail biter. The roof will actually remain closed for this segment, by the way. We're not opening it up. So, what do the Yankees do? What can they do? Jay, games 1 and 2. And frankly, this Yankees postseason, outside of maybe game 5 of the Yankees series, of the Guardian series, has been ugly offensively. Mr. Fix It, give me a fix.
Here's the fix. And, it's a cliche, and it maybe you can see it as overly simplistic, but, actually put the bat on the ball, guys. I mean, this is kind of what the Yankees need to do. The old saying, baseball is about taking a round bat and a round ball and hitting it square. The Yankees have been hitting the ball every way but square when they have actually hit it at all. We all know I'm the stat guy, counting number type stats, next gen type stats. I'm all about it. That being said, I didn't need to do too much of a deep dive to come up with a number to lay out what the Yankees need to do now that the ALCS is back in the Bronx. The number is 30, as in the number of times the Yankees have struck out against Astro pitching in the first 2 games, and it's the primary reason they are down 0-2 to Houston. Contact, or the lack of it, was the glaringly obvious issue for the Yankees offense in the 2 losses in Houston. They swung and missed 31 times in Thursday night's 3-2 loss in game 2, where they struck out 13 times as a team. They whiffed they swung and missed 27 times in Wednesday's 4-2 loss in game 1, during which they racked up a whopping 17 strikeouts. Aaron Judge and Oswaldo Cabrera were the only Yankee batters to not record a strikeout during Thursday's loss. With 4 batters striking out multiple times, their names will not be revealed to protect the guilty. The Yankees are getting virtually no offensive production from any part of the lineup, even when they do make contact. The first 4 hitters in their lineup are a combined 5 for 29. The bottom half of the order is 4 for 36. Look, we knew the Yankees faced a tough task coming into this ALCS. Houston pitchers struck out 26% of the batters they faced in the regular season, the highest mark in the American League. The Yankees, as a team, struck out 22.5% of the time, solidly 15th among the 30 major league teams. So far, the whiff rate stats are overwhelmingly in favor of the Astro pitching staff. Look, we know I've talked about this multiple times when we, this postseason so far. Stringing together hits off postseason caliber pitchers is a hard way to put together a sufficient offense. But the Yankees are receiving a stark reminder that their chances at scoring consistently will take a precipitous nosedive when nearly half of their outs are being made at the plate. The lack of contact and the number of strikeouts is alarming on their own, but more so when you consider that the Yankees led all of Major League Baseball in walks. So they're normally a team that doesn't flail or chase pitches, yet that's exactly what they're doing, is they only have 4 walks so far in this series. This is a team reliant on home runs. We talked about the total of 254 leading all of Major League Baseball. They are 60 with runners in scoring position, also led the league. Their 81.8% of runs scored via the home run is the most this postseason. So the lack of contact, especially by Judge, Anthony Rizzo, and Giancarlo Stanton, is something that has to change. Judge is 1 for 8 so far, though he's only struck out once, but he also has 0 RBI. Rizzo's 1 for 6 with 3 strikeouts, though he does have one of the only 2 home runs the team has hit so far in this series. Stanton is 2 for 8, and like Judge, only has 1 K, but also like Judge, 0 RBI. All 3 of these guys need to get off the schneid and fast. Hopefully coming back to the Bronx will help get these guys going, because as it stands right now, fellas, the only consistent hitter the Yankees have had these 2 games is Harrison Bader. And if he's still the only one by the time this weekend is over, I don't care how well Garrett Cole and Nestor Cortez pitch. The Yankees chase for 28 will stall out in the ALCS to the Astros for the fourth time since 2015.
I believe, I didn't look at the game 2 stats, and yes, Houston is in the same category, but if you can do it, we're not going to criticize it. I believe the Astros have only had 4 home. I believe it's still the case now. Astros and Yankees, both 4 runs not scored via the homer, which is insane of a stat. All right, Anthony. The pitching has been damn good for the Yankees, I feel like, in this at ALCS. Minus Severino's little not the start, just not even a hiccup. It's just like you lost.
Yeah.
Don't say that your team got lucky, especially when you're in this situation. Good enough for government work. Tyone had a very good game 1. Severino had a decent game 2, but Anthony, it just hasn't been enough. Give me a fix for the rest of the series.
Well, the fix is basically they're going to be home for games 3, 4, and 5. And they're going to have Garrett Cole and Nestor Cortez back in 2 of those games. So that's obvious. That's the obvious fix for the Yankees to get back in the series. But the pitch has been great the entire postseason. Garrett Cole has been the ace that the Yankees needed. He gave him not 1, but 2 quality starts in that division series against Cleveland. A 2.03 ERA and strike out 16 batters in 13 innings. He's been great. Nestor Cortez gave him a quality start in game 2, came back on 3 days on short rest, and gave him a great start, allowed 1 run in the game 5 clincher. The bullpen, outside of a couple of hiccups, has actually done its job. You look at Peralta, Holmes, Trevino. These guys have actually done their part. And you mentioned game 1. Tyler gave him 4 1/3 innings. He only allowed the 1 run. Was able to get out some early jams. I guess a really good Houston lineup. Severino actually pitched well in a couple of his starts. And in game 2, he made the 1 mistake pitch that Berkman hit for 3-run homer. But other than that, he gave him a quality start. The Yankees have gotten the quality pitching that was a question mark at the beginning, going into the playoffs, because we thought the Yankees' offense is there. The question was the pitching. Was Garrett Cole going to be the 2020 Garrett Cole we saw in that playoff year, or was he going to be the guy that played down in Boston in that wild card game last season? Was the postseason maybe too much for a guy like Cortez, and being going from unfortunately a low-key unknown guy to an all-star, and now being the consideration to a game 1 start? These are a lot of questions that was going in, but the Yankees the pitcher has given the Yankees an opportunity to win these first 2 games, and it's given them a chance to be competitive and at least hang around, because Houston, we know overall they're the better team, and they had the pitching advantage in the first 2 games, and even game 4, and even in these 2 games, the games 3 and 4, Les McCullers has been pushed back because he showed what can happen when a champagne bottle gone horribly wrong. But besides that point, the Yankees have the next 3 games at home. You have Cole, Cortez, and 3 and 4. Game 5, you could go with Tyler again and send Severino for a game 6. Severino has pitched well, coming back from the injury and obviously the time off between his starts. Now it's just going to be a matter of, as Jay alluded to, the offense. Can they make contact? Can they put the ball in play? By the way, somebody you tell Galen Boone that complaining about the win is not a good thing. It makes you look like Buck Showalter calling for an inspection on an opposing pitcher. Look,
all right, to be fair, if the roof was closed, that ball's leaving the yard. I will.
Yeah,
it is. But by the way, it's baseball's decision to open or close.
Yeah, it was not the Astros. We have to put that out there. It was not the Astros' decision to open the roof in game 2. That was strictly Major League Baseball, and maybe that ball goes out the park if the roof is closed. But think about this, StatCast, only one stadium. That's a home run in all the major ballparks.
You finally checked that stat, by the way.
Stadium.
And finally,
The only one.
so yeah, it's just a matter of can the Yankees get some offense.
For further proof to Anthony to Rabbi's belief that Rob Manfred hates baseball.
Well, he does. And also, by the way, Alex Bregman's home run would have been gone in 25 of 30 stadiums, according to.
Well, that ball got crushed.
It did, but it's just honestly, if you're the Yankees and you're trying to sweep the Astros in Yankee Stadium, that's a hard ask, especially because of the fact that this team. This just seems like a give up answer, but I'll just say it right now. How are you going to deal with a team with the experience that they've had in the postseason? Yes, Correa is obviously gone, but this team's been to 5 consecutive ALCSs, and even the way that they've been able to get the younger people on this team, like Jordan Alvarez, who's freaking 25, Kyle Tucker, who's 25, and
Pena.
all of the players of this team, Pena, who's 25, and just been able to use that farm system and bring up people. And then the pitching, obviously, Valdez, 28. McCullers isn't even. Christian Javier, who's going to start today's game 3, 25. And the difference of this team is they are more talented, I think, at least as a team itself, they are more youthful as a team itself, and they caught a huge break, because for all of the talk that we've talked about, and I know we don't want to look back at this year, is the Yankees losing that game 3 because of the moves that were made bullpen wise probably put them also in this 0-2 hole, because that led to the game 5 having to be played, which unfortunately got moved to Tuesday. If everything works out, and again, it's a perfect world, they're done with this series Sunday and they move themselves to Wednesday, because asking to win that game 1 was a hard ask. Asking even to win game 2 was a hard ask. And now you're in a tough situation. And that situation, unfortunately, the Yankees caused themselves by not being able to shut down the door in game 3, and then that Guardian series in 4. I know it was a weird series, but again, as I've said to Anthony and several times, even when it's your own team, if you're in trouble, you have to unfortunately make your own breaks. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And unfortunately, the Yankees haven't been able to do that. And that's why they're in the position they are right now.
Right.
They just haven't had stuff that they've been able to break.
You talked about the way the schedule broke for the Yankees, due to rain and other circumstances in the ALDS. There was no way in hell you are leaving Cleveland, flying that night into Houston, and winning game 1.
Leaving New York,
leaving New York and flying into Houston that night, getting in the wee hours of the morning, and facing that team well rested in their home ballpark. Everything,
and not just well rested, appropriately well rested, because they essentially played on Sunday. Because they played an 18-inning game on Saturday.
Right, exactly.
It's essentially 2 days rest.
Right, exactly. So, and that's the thing. So you didn't expect, the odds were not in the Yankees' favor for game 1. Game 2 was the one that they had to have.
Yeah.
And that's the one that I felt they let slip through their fingers. They did not take advantage of the opportunities that they had. That was the one they needed. They needed to leave Houston with a split. So they had to give them a better chance going back to the Bronx with Cole and Cortez lined up to pitch this weekend. Now they're in an 0-2 hole with those guys lined up to pitch. And I got to tell you, Houston can smell the blood in the water.
Yeah, I'll close the segment out by quoting Giannis Antetokounmpo, "You don't play with your food."
No.
There's no, I mean, that series had no business going 5 games. The Yankees were a better team. Overall, they did what they had to do in game 1. They let game 2 slip away, and game 3 was the game that's really hurting the Yankees right now, as you mentioned. Just as far as schedule wise, they caught a bit of a bad break with the rainouts because they lost the off days. And this is the thing: when you are a better team, you have to put an opponent down right away. You cannot let them have any moments of life, and that's the mentality that the Astros are going to have going into these games at Yankee Stadium, which they have played very well in postseason past. And this is why I think the season is on the line for Game 3. And the season is on the line, and this is why you are paying Garrett Cole the money he's getting for moments like this to save the season and to right the ship. And it's going to be on his shoulders at least one more time if the Yankees are going to have any chance of getting back in this series.
His shoulder and Aaron Judge's bat.
I said it before, and I'll say it again. I said this on social media. I'll say it again. The way the Yankees have performed, at least this season in Minute Maid Park, you could play those two teams at their strength 10 times. The Astros might win 10 of 10 just because the Yankees find new ways to lose those games. All right. By the way, fun fact, if the Astros and Phillies end up as the World Series, the Astros will have played 3 NL East opponents in 4 World Series. What does it say? The Mets have to be next year on that death list. All right. Finally, the other NL series where heavyweights have fallen. Dodgers, 112 wins, out. Braves, 101 wins, out. Cardinals, excellent roster, out. Mets, well, you know what happened.
You said the Mets. Go ahead.
The Mets,
yes,
we know what
out
happened.
too.
Out. What's left is the 2 lowest seeds in the NL. You can't call a team a Cinderella if you have a heavy contract for Bryce Harper on one side and Manny Machado and probably Juan Soto on the other side. Sorry, they're low seeds, but they're not Cinderellas. Ironically enough, both of these teams were a wild card series loss away from not even getting to play a playoff game at home this postseason. But both are now playing in front of crowds in the playoffs for the first time in 27 years combined. 11 years on the Phillies side, 16 years on the Padres side. Phillies lead this series 2-1, and games 4 and 5 are this weekend in the city of brotherly champions, Philadelphia. Anthony, Phillies are peaking at the right time. How do they get back to the Fall Classic for the first time in a lucky 13 years when they face the Yankees, by the way?
I mean, I think it's easy to say. Continue doing what you're doing when you're up 2-1 in the series. But I want to say that you continue doing what you're doing. Look, the Phillies are getting a timely hit. You see, we talked about this before the show. The Gene Segura game in Game 3. I mean, he makes a mistake. He gets some boos because it's Philadelphia. They'll boo anyone. And then he comes up with timely hits time and time again. We saw it in the divisions. I mean, the wild card series with the Phillies facing 2 outs and possibly being down 0-1 at 3-game series. He gets the big hit that pretty much opened up the floodgates in that game. Game 3, he gets the big hit, and pretty much in a pitch in the same location, no less. But also you get in the occasional Kyle Schwarber bomb that, you know what, they got to put a tape measure into some of his home runs. I mean, this guy is
488
unbelievable
on that home run.
Bryce Harper's being a superstar that they figured they would acquire. Zach Wheeler's been an ace and virtually unhittable in his starts, particularly in Game 1 in a hostile situation. And I throw this out there: how cool is it to see the Nolan brothers going against each other in a playoff series with a chance of the World Series on the line? But also Rob Thompson and the job he's done. And Rabbi, I gotta give you credit for this because you said that this team that the change is going to be was definitely going to be a difference maker.
They needed a new voice. Girardi they weren't playing for Girardi.
Look, I was at that Sunday night game, which led to Joe Girardi's firing. Where you saw the team just really tense. It didn't look like they were afraid to just make a mistake. And now you see this team, they're a lot more looser, they're more freely. Bob Thompson's not eating he's not eating their lunch. The old Harsher head coach, Joe Gardy used to say to his players, he's letting them play, he's letting them make them occasional mistakes, they hold themselves accountable, but they're making up for it. And I think that's been the biggest difference, and the fact that they're playing a lot more looser. They're playing with house money. This is a team that didn't clinch a playoff spot until the third to last day of the regular season, and they had to say a thank you bastard to the Chicago Cubs for being playoff records. You saw what they did to the Mets. but they also did it to the Brewers that weekend also. But this team just getting a second life, and that crowd is this thing, and I talked about it before the start of our show. That crowd has been hungry. It's been 11 years. I lived in Philadelphia for a while. For those of you who don't know that, and I went to school down, and to be around that fan base and that stadium, just seeing it before a playoff game, just unbelievable. And when you have Schwarber going long ball, literally in the very first inning to start out and get that crowd into it, I think that's been such a huge. Plus, they're two very good fan bases, FYI. So that's why this series has been so fun to watch the first 3 games. But the Phillies right now, they're playing with a lot of days. Also, this bullpen was terrible for most of the year, and now you have Alvarez, so Anthony Dominguez being kind of guys who are stepping up. Old friend and Noah Syndergaard getting them a quality start in a bullpen game that the Phillies actually won to clinch the division series against Atlanta. It's going to be here's the thing, because of the scheduling, days are going to be difficult for the Phillies as far as to manage their bullpen going down the stretch, because there are no more off days. They literally have no more off days the rest of the way. The rest of the game 7. So you're looking at 4 games in 4 days. So it's gonna be interesting to see how Thompson manages the bullpen when Dominguez and Alvarez may not be available. All the other guys in the bullpen who would get outs, and more importantly, can he trust those guys to come in a big situation and get those big outs when needed?
I just realized why they're playing earlier tomorrow, because they have to go in the game 6 would be immediately on the West Coast the next day.
Matt Fred hates baseball. He said this team's no favors with the scheduling.
The lockout.
It's the lockout hated baseball. All right, Jay. The Padres have been matching the Phillies in a lot of this series, except that little thing called the home run. So how do they get back to the Fall Classic for the first time in 24 years? When they face the Yankees, by the way, in that series.
It's again, I'm gonna take the same, cliche, Captain Obvious, potentially overly simplistic route as I did with the Yankees. Padres' best players simply need to play better. Like I said, maybe the Captain Obvious angles, but that's the way I see it. Third baseman Manny Machado, 3 for 13 in this series so far, 1 RBI. Off a solo home run, he struck out 3 times. Right fielder Juan Soto, 2 for 11, no RBI, 4 strikeouts. Brandon Drury and Josh Bell are the only hitters that have hit as expected. Drury's 4 for 8. He only played games 1 and 2 with a home run and 3 RBI. Bell is 4 for 10 with a home run and 2 RBI. The 8-5 win in game 2 is the only game where all 4 have hit in the same game. They collectively went 9 for 18, each scored a run. Machado, Drury, and Bell each left the yard, and the 4 combined for 7 of the 8 runs batted in. Starting pitching hasn't been great either. Blake Snell gave up 4 runs, all earned on 5 hits over 5 innings in the game to win, getting lucky as the Padres offense showed up that game. Joe Musgrave was just as bad, giving up 4 runs, all earned on 8 hits over 5 2/3 inning in the game 3 loss. Yu Darvish is the only Padres total that's looked like his usual self so far. He gave up 2 runs, both earned on just 3 hits over 7 solid innings. Unfortunately, he took the loss in game 1. Game 4 is set up for the Padres to have these 4 guys hit like they did in game 2. Both teams will likely be bullpenning this game, but the Phillies will be starting, or opening, if you will, with left-hander Bailey Falter, who is making his postseason debut and hasn't pitched in 17 days. Noah Syndergaard is likely to follow, but after that, you're looking at low leverage guys like Andrew Bellotti and Connor Brogdon, who, don't usually find themselves in these type of situations. But it's going to be that way because Sir Anthony Dominguez, the Phillies' most lethal weapon out of the pen, is likely unavailable. Padres will start veteran Mike Clevenger, and they have their top 2 relievers in Robert Suarez and Josh Hader ready and raring to go. They're coming off 2 days of rest. So hopefully that means the Padres pitching can keep the Phillies hitters in check. With that scenario on the mound, the hope is that the Padres fearsome foursome all take the bats off their collective shoulder and tie this series up. The momentum right now is clearly in the Phillies' favor. So the Padres desperately need those hitters to not just hit, but slug if they want to stay in this series.
I'm going to just close it up with this very quickly. First of all, Philly, my God, Eagles are 6-0. The Flyers got off to a 3-0 start, did lose last night, lost 2 nights ago to Florida. Their new coach, by the way, John Tortorella. So that team is getting itself back in it. And of course, obviously, I know the Sixers are 0-2, but they're still so Philly. City of Champions right now. Let's see if that continues. And again, that's one of the reasons why that Citizens Bank Park is a madhouse right now. It'll be very interesting to see how that affects a lot of teams in the postseason. Anthony, quickly.
Okay. See, you said Philadelphia City of Champions. You're making me crave Geno's right now. Okay.
Oh, I'm definitely craving a cheesesteak right now myself too. Okay. But I'm just saying. It's been a very fruitful few months. And also, one thing that I just noticed in this.
And the Philadelphia and the home of WrestleMania next
year. Yes, WrestleMania 40. WrestleMania 40, yes. But also the fact that one thing I've noticed is, again, you mentioned the Phillies bullpen has been outstanding this postseason. And it just shows. They have guys who are, hey, go out there, throw heat, strike some guys out. And they've done just that. San Diego's done the same thing, by the way. That's the reason why they won the LA series. They didn't get great quality starts. Like Musgrove, I think, only went 5 in the clincher against Los Angeles in Game 4, but their bullpen has been unhittable. And that's something to be really to see in this game today. It's going to be, I feel like you're going to see a lot of zeros on that board. There ain't going to be any crooked numbers coming up because, and if you just even look around all of baseball, I mean, Seattle and Houston went 17 innings of scoreless baseball last week. Bullpens, Yankees have had a pretty good bullpen in the offseason. Compared to others, they look kind of average, but bullpen. And you have starters who can go 6. It's actually gone back the other way finally, that people can get on a horse. Again, I joked around that Rob Manfred hates baseball a lot, but the hitting has been terrible in baseball over this postseason, as we've seen, but the pitching has been outstanding. And that's why I said, if I ever have a kid, they're going to be trained to be a relief pitcher because they're going to make a nice decent amount of money and they don't have to put too much strain on their arm.
There you go.
Yeah, that's where the money goes.
It is where the money goes. All right. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Stephen Rabinowitz. Let's do a little bit of house clearing for you. Happy birthday, Mr. Jay Kaplan, who turned yesterday.
Thank you.
Give him another year.
Enjoy having you gents be part of my birthday weekend. Always fun to do the show with you guys, but having it be on the weekend, I celebrate my birthday, a little extra something there. So thank you.
Hopefully it's not like 2 hours of your life wasted. I'm glad about that. Never. And a very happy birthday from earlier this week to Mr. Stephen D. Ferguson, one of the creators of the show that we're doing right now.
Happy birthday.
Let's all see each other in person at M&N sooner rather than later. Now moving to the 30s in Manhattan. All right. For that being said, again, for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Steve Rabinowitz. Let's do all the socials right now. YouTube.com/OnSportsLinesOnDemand, Facebook.com/OnSportsLinesOnDemand. And because we really, really sympathize with the guy who misspelled DeAndre Hopkins earlier today, at ONTH Sports Lines on Twitter, where you can get nuggets about the playoffs that are currently going on and other things that you might maybe even interesting to know and not know. Until next time, when hopefully the Yankees are still in the playoffs, and hopefully we still have winning teams in New York football. We will at least for another week, technically record-wise. Yeah, this is the Twilight Zone. Have a good afternoon from On the Sports Lines. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Enjoy your weekend, folks.